Hey everyone, so we're at the Corsair booth now at Computex 2024. If we take a quick look around the room, a couple things. Number one, I will be absolutely shocked if I don't get sick after this. And number two is they've got a few products we're going to talk about. So one of them is the 9000D, which is a gargantuan case. It has some really fine attention to detail elements that I liked. So we're planning to highlight some of those, such as, for example, the tiny markings for fan spacing on the rails and the top and the front. So pretty positive on the 9000D. It's not something most people are going to use. There's a 3500X series case behind me as well. It's supposed to be a $90 showcase PC case competitor. That one I'm a little critical on. We'll talk about why. It mostly has to do with airflow and fan positioning. And then the Titan cooling as well, off on the wall to my side here, is the last area we're going to focus. And for that, I have some engineering detail at kind of a top level, but interesting stuff for the flow and pump design internally that I was actually really excited to get, because a lot of times the coolers at these shows, it's a cooler and it has lights and it costs money, and that's the most information I get. But for this one, we have some engineering discussion we can do. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me, and everyone is going to be like, why is this guy yelling so much? That room is very quiet. I can assure you that's not the case. Let's get started. Was magst du?
Ich weiß es auch nicht so genau.
I don't understand. I've lost my German ability. I did, however, learn how to say, the more you buy yesterday. Je mehr du kaufst.
Desto mehr kannst du sparen.
How do you like the Corsair booth?
I like that nothing here is branded AI.
That you know of. So first up is the 9000D. So this is a gargantuan case. It is very familiar to the 1000D, for those of you who remember that. That is because it shares a lot of the tooling, but in this instance, it is such a massive case that the tooling cost for the original 1000D was approaching or around $1 million. So they're trying to avoid amortizing that again, which means that the price can be more similar to the 1000D. So this is supposed to be around $500 retail when it ships in about September. So that's the ultra basics. Now, the things that I actually kind of liked about it was mostly attention to detail. So this one has fans installed. We have some shots of an empty one though. We're pulling this fan cage out. First of all, really small stuff I like seeing. So the rails were greased, which is great. And then also there's these really tiny millimeter markings on the top to show the spacing fan position. It can do up to a 200 for the fan size, or it can go too deep with 120s in this scenario here. The main thing though on the showcase system that they've built is probably the dual system design. We haven't seen these a whole lot in recent years. So there was a period where this was a massive trend. Fantex did it, a lot of companies were doing this. Kind of died out, where the original idea was a capture machine and then kind of your main desktop machine. You could also do a NAS or something like that. So this is a highly specific use case. If you didn't want to do a dual machine, you just end up with a huge amount of empty space in the case to work with. But the way they've got it configured is there's 2 PCIe slots here for the mini ITX board, and then for the larger board, it's got the horizontal mounting, but as I understand it, there's also a vertical mounting kit. You can see for water cooling, so they've mounted 4 separate pump res combos, and then on the front, they have another set of 2 radiators. I think these end up being, let's see, these are 2 120s deep, and then it's like 420 for length. Coming around the side, so the design for the panels on these is similar in some ways to the 3500, where they're punching out this, I don't know what this is, like a Triforce. It's like an intellectual property avoiding Triforce. We're gonna go with that. I think there are no problems with Nintendo here. One of the things I was talking about though, that's gonna come up with the 3500, is that we have seen with panel designs, as the companies try to perforate them different ways to give some different style, one of the problems that some of them are running into is this back pressure that's created on the fan, where when the fan blade aligns parallel with whatever the slat design is, you get an annoying hum sometimes as a result of that blade pass. Going with a more random pattern like this, where they definitely did this for looks first and foremost and branding, but it can also help with that noise. Although these are seated really far back, there's a huge filter behind it. Let's come around to the back of the case. So over here, am I going to be able to open this? Yes. So on the back of the case, I need my notes. All right. So on the back of the case, this is what's familiar to me from the 1000D, where this is about 30% new tooling, I was told, from the 1000D. So a lot of it's going to be really familiar to those of you who remember it. I remember it was launched, I think, at a CES many years ago, and it had French doors, which this still does. So they've got 3 SSD sleds here, and then 3 more back here. And then I think they're just trying to get cute with showing off the depth because they've mounted 3 of the link hubs on the back. So power supply's down on the bottom right now. My only kind of piece of critique for this case, I think, is going to be here, where currently that is ventilated for about half of the power supply, and it's right over where the fan hub is, which is blocked anyway. So I'd like to see that come out a little further as a piece of feedback, but I think it's already done, so that's not going to happen. Otherwise, all the tubing has been done back here as well. They've got a back connect motherboard, and then this cable here that's running up to front I/O, or top front I/O, is actually just running USB to the board, and so all the ports on the top front end up basically pulling through the motherboard directly, so whatever the bandwidth is of the port on the board is going to be the bandwidth of all of your ports at the front top of the case. So as long as it's a higher bandwidth connection, then depending on how many drives you connect at once should be sufficient, but it also avoids having multiple, basically like just a nest of cables that come down from the front panel for all the I/O. So other small touches, illuminated the front top, so it's got LED lighting in it, and that's also plugged in through the same connector as I understand it right now. And then you could also do side mount fans here, where if we try to get a shot kind of angled down into the case, you can see the large pass-through channels with this just huge amount of space for cabling, or in the case here, they've done water cooling, and then the actual hubs too. So that's gonna be it for the 9000D. So it's supposed to be $500, shipping in September. I don't think we're gonna review it just because our review bench is set up for air cooling testing. That is obviously not appropriate for this at all. This is like you need to build some kind of mini server, massive workstation, dual system configuration or whatever. So we won't be testing it, but thought we'd tell you about it. And now we'll move on to the next thing. All right, so next we're going to talk about the 3500. It just got much quieter in here. Suddenly I'm the problem. So the 3500 case, there are a few variants of this. We'll hit the prices first. It's available now, I guess, on back order. It won't be really shipping until about July. They're going for $90 for the empty variation called the 3500X. They're going to have a $110 option, which is ARGB 3 RS120 fans. They're side-mounted, and they're normal directional, so not reverse blade. And then there's a $150 IQ Link 3500X RGB, which is 3 RX120s side-mounted as well. So that's kind of the basics. The first thing I want to talk about is the thing that I felt the most strongly about. So if we pop this panel off, you will see down here is the power supply. So this is one of the, I guess they call it shift, but one of the rotated power supplies. Power supply itself is not relevant, but the height of it is. So you can see right here, there's this gap that's, I don't know what that is, like maybe 10 millimeters or something. And that gap, if we swing around to the other side of the case, is what the these fans are supposed to be pulling through. So let's pop this panel. Well, I was going to hand it to someone to not break it, but we'll just hope it doesn't fall. So the fans here on the top, these end up, they're trying to do an intake through the power supply shroud, and with that power supply there so close, they really are, they're having to fight enormous amounts of obstruction. I don't think they're really going to have the pressure to push a meaningful amount of air into the GPU. So we'll test it. This is one I'm going to buy when we get back. This is much more useful because it's right against the floor of the case, which is always good. You're close to the actual direct access to fresh air. The spacing here is good. You want to see at least an inch spacing normally at the bottom of the case to actually be able to get flow into the fan and not lose all your pressure in the process. So this one I think is configured well. It's just that if you want to feed air into the GPU itself, these I would almost rather not see them as options than see them as options that are terrible. So we'll test it, but that's kind of my biggest piece of criticism for this. The ways to work on this would be to perforate this front panel. So punching holes in here in the front of the power supply shroud would at least give it access to air coming in through this, which would be pretty interesting, or perforating on the side here. But then they'd have to run a metal strip here that's perforated, so they shrink their glass size. It kind of cuts down on what they're going for with the case, which is a showcase PC, large glass panels that are 90-degree butted. So they've got difficult decisions there. Personally, I'd rather just see no option to mount than an option that would lead people to a bad configuration. Now for the rest of the case, so this is a back connect support. I've been asking all the vendors about the motherboard tray stiffness, and a lot of the companies are going to a 0.8 millimeter thick steel or thereabouts to try and account for punching holes in. Corsair said they haven't really had any problems with the rigidity of the panels, whereas some of the vendors that manufacturers that make the cheaper cases that use this really thin steel motherboard trays, they've had to bump up the steel thickness, they're telling us, because of the cheese grater of holes that back connect requires. So that's actually going to be something we'll be paying attention to in our quality analysis for case reviews now. I can't say how stiff this is or isn't. It's got a system in it. But anyway, moving on. Side panel mount is here, so they've got the 120s installed now. This is where they'll come if one of the cases with pre-installed fans is what you buy, and otherwise the front panel is also removable, which is kind of one of the main features, give more access to the case. Of course, there's done a little bit of kind of structural reinforcement over there, but I think we don't do testing like that. So this one we'll have to look at. I'm going to benchmark it, we'll buy it when we get back. All right, so the next one we're talking about is going to be the coolers. Corsair's naming for this has changed a little bit. It's pretty simple, though. So calling all of them Titan, and then the size of the radiator in standard sizing, and then the suffix is just the type of fan that's attached to it. We'll go over the really basic product level stuff before I get into the, to me anyway, more interesting engineering discussion. So product side, they are doing something that we saw at the Thermalright booth, kind of, which is different types of pump caps that can pop onto the liquid cooler. So this kind of got that be quiet look from the one they had at their booth. And then there is a VRM fan one as well, which is the one that I guess, of course, interests me the most. So small VRM fan on the top. It is a pogo pin, or pogo pin connection on the bottom here. And then for the actual flow, you can see through the side there, they've got the cutout and a very slightly chamfered edge, which is supposed to help guide the air down towards the board and the VRM components. Now, Corsair has some of their own test data here. We'll run it through our testing and standardize it so you can compare it to how the reduction is in the VRM thermals from their fan versus, say, the Arctic one is maybe the most popular. But the thing that I'm most interested in here is some of the engineering discussion. So I'm going to partially quote and partially paraphrase some of the information from Corsair, where my question was, okay, you're saying this is a three-phase motor. What does that mean? Why does it matter? And then also, how is the interior designed for the pump and actual channeling of things? So, a couple things. First of all, the internal chamber has two inlets on microchannels on the outside. Now, if you've seen our teardowns, you'll be familiar with these longer channels along the sides of the microfins that basically are kind of like a perpendicular, actually a parallel entry of flow into the fins. So it's got that, but then there's a pocket in the center, which was described to me as it using suction or creating it to pull the liquid up and into the impeller chamber, which is above that. The impeller itself is a little different as well from what we've seen previously. So what they're trying to do, they say, is use a pressure differential across a central exit and then use increased flow centrally and slower flow on the channels on the outside. So, as it was described to me, this is a more of a resistance equation than anything else, where Corsair is going for basically attacking the resistance that those channels create in the microfin. So sometimes you have to space out the fin density, go with lower density, more spacing to encourage water flow through it, and Corsair is trying to kind of tackle that problem and keep the density higher. Now, for the impeller, they tell us that it is a larger impeller. It is an outer stator and an inner magnet, so we've seen stuff like that before. They say, off the top of the engineering mind here, it was 7 blades, I think. I'll have to check that when we take it apart. It's a chaotic environment. 5 millimeters deep, and then the diameter I don't have, but it's supposed to be a larger diameter impeller than you would see, for example, on those older Asetek style liquid coolers that we've taken apart. As for the three-phase motor, I asked about that too. So we did get something beyond the marketing 3 words there, and it comes down to reliability, at least as far as I'm told right now. So apparently a traditional single-phase uses a Hall effect sensor, and the positioning of that ends up important for reliability. So I could actually speak to this. We've had older, like Gen 3, Gen 4 Asetek pumps fail where they get knocked out of alignment a little bit, and it ends up just wobbling out and dying. So that's the design changes. Also, the 3-phase approach means there's no Hall effect sensor, and they say it's a more even transition force with a reduced lower frequency hum. So that kind of walks you through some of the background to the Titan coolers. And from information perspective from these shows, this is what I want to see, where companies that try to position themselves as engineering, they need to put engineers in the front, and they need to give us information. I feel like we got some of that here today, so happy about that. We'll probably test these once they come out, but otherwise, the product level stuff, you can just kind of look at it and decide what you think on your own. You don't need me for that. And otherwise, I think that kind of covers the booth. So thanks for watching. As always, there's a ton of content on the channel. We should have just posted MSI before this one, so go watch that if you haven't seen it. Intel said that we can't say LGA 1851 or Z890 in videos, so I'm just making sure everyone knows we can't say LGA 1851 or Z890. I really want to make sure everyone knows that. So anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.